All right, welcome everyone. Today, we're cracking open a case file from one of the most incredible legal texts in the world, the Talmud. But this isn't just going to be a dry reading of ancient law. Oh no, we are following the trail of a genuine detective story, complete with clues, red herrings, and mind-bending deductions that lead us to a mystery far deeper than you can imagine. So here's the case at the heart of it all. On the surface, it seems pretty straightforward. A father dedicates an animal as an offering, but then he passes away, leaving it to his two sons. Simple enough, right? But trust me, this one little question sets off an intellectual chain reaction that takes us all the way from property law to the very nature of sin and forgiveness. And right away, we get our first clue, courtesy of the sage Rabbi Yohanan. He lays down the law. The sons have to go through with the sacrifice, and they absolutely cannot swap this animal for another one. They're locked in. Now, this rule, it seems like such a minor detail, but it's the key that's going to unlock this entire investigation. Okay, so let's officially kick off our investigation by really digging into this no substitution rule. Why? Why can't they just switch it out for a different animal? The answer to that is where we find the first layer of this whole complex puzzle. First things first, we need to get a key term on the table. It's called substitution, or temora in Hebrew. It's literally the act of saying, hey, this non-holy animal is now the substitute for that holy one. And the law is super, super strict about this. You don't do it. And knowing that is absolutely crucial for what comes next. So the first theory that pops up is pretty clean and straightforward. The logic is kind of like this. The law says partners can't substitute a joint offering. The two sons are now partners in this inheritance. So the reason they can't substitute must be because they now legally own the animal together as partners. Boom. Makes perfect sense. Case closed, right? Well, if you know anything about the Talmud, you know it's never that easy. And just when you think everything's all neat and tidy, bam, a brilliant objection gets raised that just throws the whole theory into chaos. This is our big plot twist. The moment the detectives realize they might have been looking at the evidence all wrong. This is where another sage, Rav Yaakov, comes in, and he points out a massive, glaring contradiction. He's like, wait a minute, guys. Over here with substitution, you're arguing that a law written for one person can't apply to two. But then, in this other really similar case with tithes, you argue the exact opposite. You say a law for one can apply to two. What gives? You can't have it both ways. And the way they solve this is just brilliant. It's so elegant. The rabbis figure out that the sons aren't just getting the property, they're inheriting their father's entire legal status. Think of it like this. Whatever their dad could legally do, they can now do. And whatever he couldn't do, they can't do. So it has nothing to do with them being partners and everything to do with them stepping directly into their father's shoes. Just like that, the contradiction just vanishes. But you see, solving one puzzle in the Talmud just opens up a door to another, deeper rabbit hole. Now we have an even bigger question on our hands. Okay, so they own the animal, great. But does this offering, which was meant for their dad, actually work for them? Does it atone for their sins? We've just jumped from a legal case to a profoundly spiritual one. To tackle this, the Talmud brings in this really cool, kind of subtle idea called mikufeya. You could translate it as incidental atonement. The thinking is, look, the offering wasn't specifically for the sons, so it's not their primary atonement. But they still get a kind of secondary benefit from it. It's like being in the spiritual splash zone. It's a way of saying, yeah, it works for them, but not in the way you might think. And just look at how far we've come. We started with a simple inheritance problem, and it's just exploded into this huge philosophical investigation. We're not even really talking about who owns the animal anymore. The real question, the deeper mystery is, how does atonement actually work? What are the mechanics? When does it kick in? And this brings us to the absolute core dilemma for the rest of our journey. I want you to picture this. On Monday, you set aside an animal for an offering. Tuesday, you mess up, you commit a sin. Wednesday, you finally make the sacrifice. The big question is, does that offering you picked out on Monday cover the sin you committed on Tuesday? That is a total mind bender, right? It's all about time, intention, and how this whole process really functions. Okay, so the first piece of evidence they bring to the table is about the ritual of placing hands on the animal. There's this text that says if you forget to do it, the offering has somehow both atoned and not atoned. Kind of weird, right? So the argument they make is, hey, maybe it atoned for all your old sins that existed before, but it failed to atone for the new sin of messing up the ritual. If that's true, it looks like solid proof that an offering can't cover sins that happen after you've designated it. But again, just when it looks like they've got it all figured out, in comes one of the heavy hitters of the Talmud, a genius named Rava, and he just takes a wrecking ball to the entire argument. And this is just a masterclass in logical precision. Rava points out a fatal flaw in the timeline. He says, hold on a second. The sin of failing to place your hands doesn't actually happen until after the animal is slaughtered. Why? Because you could have done it right up until the very last second. But our whole question is about sins committed before the slaughter. So this proof, it's totally irrelevant. He basically has the evidence thrown out of court. So where does that leave us? Well, we're left with an open case file. And honestly, that's the whole point. That's the beauty of this kind of study. The goal isn't always about getting that one simple final answer. It's about the process, about wrestling with the question itself, exploring every single angle. The investigation is the destination. But the search for clues isn't over. They bring in a new piece of evidence, this time about the 2 goats sacrificed on the holiday of Shavuot. A certain Rabbi Shimon says something incredible. The second goat atones for sins that happened in that little window of time after the first one was sacrificed. This looks like the smoking gun, doesn't it? A crystal clear example of an offering atoning for a future sin. But you know the drill by now. The second this perfect proof is presented, the other scholars pounce on it. They start poking holes, raising a storm of counter-arguments. Well, maybe the goats weren't designated at the same time. Hey, aren't communal offerings a whole different ballgame with special rules? Even what looks like solid gold proof gets put under the microscope and stress-tested from every angle imaginable. And all of this leaves us with a final, profound thought. Think about where we started. A simple inheritance problem, and it took us on this wild journey through a maze of logic and spirituality. And in the end, you realize the goal wasn't just to find an answer. It was to build a better question. We went from asking, who owns the animal, to asking, what is the true nature and purpose of atonement? And that is a question worth investigating for a lifetime.